My children made me sign a paper. They thought I didn't know it was to transfer my land and my house to them, so this is what I did.
Eleanor Hartwell woke up that March morning with a strange feeling in her chest. At 82 years old, she had learned to trust those hunches that came without warning. While preparing her coffee in the kitchen of the house she had built brick by brick 40 years ago, she looked out the window toward the land that stretched as far as the eye could see. 5 acres of fertile land that she had transformed from a piece of barren ground into a thriving farm with her own hands. Her blue eyes, though tired from the years, still held that spark of intelligence that had characterized her since she was young. The wrinkles on her face, weathered by the sun, told stories of decades of hard work, sleepless nights caring for 5 children when she was widowed at 40, calloused hands that had kneaded bread every day without fail. The telephone rang, interrupting her thoughts. It was Robert, her eldest son. "Good morning, Mom. How are you feeling today?" "Fine, honey, hanging in there. How about you?" "Oh, you know, Mom. Hey, how would you feel if we all came to see you this afternoon? It's been a while since we got together." Eleanor frowned. It was true they hadn't all gathered in a while, but that's exactly why it seemed strange. Since Christmas, when she'd had to lend money to Michael to pay off his failed business debts, visits had been sporadic and always with an outstretched hand. "Everyone? Even Catherine and the boys?" "Yes, Mom, everyone. We want to spend time with you." Something in Robert's tone didn't sit right with her. After raising 5 children alone, she had developed a sixth sense for detecting when they were lying to her. But a mother's heart always wants to believe the best. "All right, honey. I'll expect you around 4. "Perfect, Mom. Oh, and get ready, because we have something important to discuss with you." When she hung up the phone, Eleanor stood thoughtful for a moment. "Something important to discuss." Those words echoed in her head like an alarm bell. In recent years, every time one of her children had something important to discuss, it ended up being a request for money or help getting out of some trouble. She went to the room that had been her late husband's, Frank, and that she now used as an office. She opened the solid wood desk he had made with his own hands and reviewed the important documents she kept there. The property deeds, receipts for all the payments she had made for 40 years, proof of all the improvements she had made. Everything was in order. Everything was in her name. But there was something else she kept in that desk, something none of her children knew existed. In the deepest drawer, behind some old photographs, was a copy of a will she had secretly commissioned 2 years ago. There was also a folder with legal documents she had prepared with the help of Harold Peterson, a trusted lawyer in town. Eleanor wasn't the naive old woman her children thought she was. She had begun to suspect their true intentions when she noticed they only sought her out when they had financial problems. Robert had lost a fortune gambling and had to sell his house. Catherine owed 6 months' rent and lived in constant fear of eviction. Michael had failed at 3 consecutive businesses and was drowning in debt. Louis had spent the money she'd given him for his son's college tuition on alcohol and gambling. And David, the youngest, owed a fortune in child support and had disappeared for months evading his responsibilities. Eleanor knew it all. In a small town like theirs, news traveled fast, and she had a network of friends who told her everything that happened. Mrs. Peterson, her lifelong neighbor, had informed her about Robert's debts. The lady at the bank had mentioned Catherine's problems. Her late husband's friend had told her about Michael's failures. But despite knowing all this, she had continued helping them. She had sold her jewelry to pay for Robert and Catherine's college education. She had mortgaged the house twice to get Michael out of trouble. She had worked cleaning other people's houses until she was 75 to give them money when they needed it. She had watched the grandchildren when her children couldn't. She closed the desk and returned to the kitchen. She began preparing food for her children, as she had done her entire life. Fried chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans, homemade biscuits. Although something inside told her this meeting wouldn't be like the others, she couldn't help showing her love through food. While cooking, she remembered the days when she was young and newly widowed. Frank had died in a work accident when Robert was barely 15, and David, the youngest, only 8. 5 children to feed, clothe, and educate on the salary of an uneducated woman in the 70s. It had been the hardest time of her life. She had worked everything: maid, laundress, cook at a diner, street food vendor, getting up at 4 in the morning and going to bed past midnight. Her hands had become rough as sandpaper. Her back had bent from heavy loads, but she had never complained. It was all for her children, so they would have the opportunities she never had. With the money from Frank's life insurance, she had bought the land. 5 acres of barren land that nobody wanted, but that she saw with visionary eyes. Little by little, weekend after weekend, she had cleared the brush, planted fruit trees, built fences, made the land bear fruit. When the children grew up and left home, Eleanor continued working on her farm. She sold oranges, apples, vegetables, and fresh eggs at the town market. With that money, she had been able to improve the house, add rooms, install ceramic floors, put in a full bathroom. What had started as a 2-room house with a dirt floor had become a respectable property. At 3:30 in the afternoon, she began getting ready to receive her children. She put on her navy blue dress, the one she reserved for special occasions, combed her hair carefully, and put on the gold earrings that had been her wedding gift. She wanted to look good for them, as always. Promptly at 4, she heard the sound of cars arriving. From the window, she saw they had all come. Robert, in his new car. How had he gotten money to buy it if he was broke? Catherine with her husband. Michael with his pickup truck. Louis on his motorcycle. And David, who had arrived in a taxi. Eleanor went out to greet them with a smile, but something in her children's attitude immediately put her on alert. Normally, when they arrived, they greeted her with hugs and kisses, asked about her health, commented on the weather or town news. This time, they all seemed nervous, avoided direct eye contact, and there was an atmosphere of tension you could cut with a knife. "How wonderful that you all came," said Eleanor, hugging each one. Come in, you must be hungry. I made fried chicken just how you like it." "Thanks, Mom," mumbled Robert. "But first we need to talk to you about something important." There was that phrase again. Something important. Eleanor felt her stomach clench. They sat in the living room, that living room she had decorated so lovingly over the years. The wooden furniture Frank had made, family photographs on the walls, memories of a lifetime. Her children seemed to be seeing everything, as if for the first time. But not with nostalgia, but with an evaluating look that chilled her blood. Robert cleared his throat. It was evident he was the group's spokesman. "Mom, we've been talking among ourselves, and we're worried about you." "Worried? Why? I'm in good health. I take care of myself. I don't cause problems for anyone." Catherine approached and took her hand with a tenderness that seemed acted. "Of course you're fine, Mom. But you're 82 years old. We think it's time for us to help you more." "How?" Louis, who had been smoking nervously, crushed his cigarette in the ashtray. "Mom, you know how the country's economic situation is. Inflation, crime, legal problems. We think your properties are in danger." "What kind of danger?" asked Eleanor, though she was already beginning to imagine where the conversation was heading. Michael joined the explanation. "Well, look, Mom, if something were to happen to you, imagine the legal mess it would be for us to sort everything out. The paperwork, taxes, deeds. We could lose everything because of bureaucracy." David, who had been quiet, finally spoke. We don't want anything to happen to you, Mom, but we have to be realistic. At your age, anything can happen. Eleanor looked at them one by one. Her children, her flesh and blood, for whom she had given everything, were sitting there talking about her death, as if it were imminent, as if they were already planning what to do with her things. "And what do you propose?" she asked in a calm voice, though inside she felt a mixture of pain and rage. Robert took out a briefcase he had brought and put some documents on the coffee table. "Mom, we need you to sign some papers. It's to protect your properties, so everything is in order." "What kind of papers?" "Nothing complicated, Mom," said Catherine. "It's just so we can help you with paperwork if someday you can't do it yourself." Eleanor took the documents and put on her glasses. The small letters danced before her tired eyes, but she managed to read some key words. Transfer, assignment of rights, new owners. Her heart began to beat faster. This wasn't what her children had told her. This was something completely different. "Let me read carefully," she said, trying to keep her voice calm. But Catherine immediately took the papers from her hands. "Oh, Mom, there are many pages with very complicated legal words. We already reviewed them with a lawyer. Everything is in order. You just need to sign here, here, and here." Catherine pointed with her finger to the lines where she should sign, but strategically covered the important parts of the document with her hand. Those parts Eleanor had managed to read that spoke of property transfer. "Are you sure nothing bad happens if I sign this?" asked Eleanor, feeling her voice tremble slightly. "Of course, Mom," they all said in unison, but none looked her directly in the eyes. Robert moved closer. "Mom, trust us. We're your children. Do you think we'd do something bad to you?" That question was like a slap. Eleanor looked at them one by one, searching their faces for some sign of the love and respect she expected from her children. But what she saw completely disarmed her. She saw urgency, nervousness, guilt, but not love. Her own children were seeing her as an obstacle, as something they had to solve. "Mom," insisted Michael, "it's just paperwork. Sign so we can be at peace." "Yes, Mom," added Louis. "Do it for us." Eleanor felt a knot in her throat, the size of a tennis ball. These were her children, for whom she had sacrificed everything. She had sold her jewelry to pay for Robert and Catherine's college education. She had worked as a maid in other people's houses so Louis could study mechanics. She had mortgaged the house twice to get Michael out of trouble when his businesses failed. She had watched David's children when he irresponsibly left for 3 years. And now they were there, asking her to sign papers that clearly weren't what they had told her, using her mother's love against her. In that moment of maximum tension, when Eleanor was torn between the betrayal she felt and the love she had for them, a part of her silently screamed, "If this story is touching your heart, if you know someone who has gone through something similar, please share this video. Give it a like if you believe we all deserve respect, regardless of age. And subscribe for more stories that remind us of the value of true family." But her moment of doubt passed quickly. Eleanor looked at the pen Catherine had put in her hand. It was an expensive pen, probably bought especially for this occasion. Everything was planned. Everything was calculated. "Mom?" asked Robert impatiently. "Are you going to sign or not?" Eleanor looked at them one more time. 40 years of sacrifice, sleepless nights, hard work. 40 years giving them everything she had and more. And this is how they repaid her. "All right," she finally said. "I'm going to sign." With a trembling hand, she signed where Catherine pointed. Once, twice, 3 times. Each signature felt like a stab to her own heart, because for the first time in her life, she didn't completely trust her children. While signing, she could notice how her children visibly relaxed. Robert stopped nervously drumming his fingers on his leg. Catherine released the air she had been holding. Michael stopped smoking compulsively. Louis put away the cell phone he had been checking every 2 seconds. David could finally look her in the eyes. "Done, Mom," said Robert, quickly putting the documents in his briefcase. "Now you can be at peace. Everything is protected." "Is that all?" asked Eleanor. "Yes, Mom, that's all. Now we can go eat that fried chicken that smells delicious." But the tranquility was short-lived. As soon as they finished eating, everyone began making excuses to leave. Robert had an important appointment. Catherine had arranged to meet some friends. Michael had to check his truck. Louis had a night shift. David had to return to the city. They left as quickly as they had arrived, with kisses on the cheek and promises to return soon that sounded hollow. Eleanor was left alone in her living room, with dirty dishes on the table and a silence that weighed like a slab. She collected the dishes mechanically, stored the leftover food, cleaned the kitchen. But she did everything automatically, because her mind was elsewhere, processing what had just happened. When she finished cleaning, she sat in her favorite rocking chair. That rocking chair where she had nursed her 5 children, where she had spent entire nights caring for them when they were sick, where she had cried silently when Frank died, so as not to worry the children. She looked at the family photographs adorning the living room. There they all were, in happier times. Robert at his college graduation, Catherine on her wedding day, Michael when he opened his first business, Louis with his first job, David with his first child. In all those photographs, she appeared smiling, proud, happy for her children's achievements. What had happened? When had everything started to change? When had her children begun to see her as a burden instead of their mother? She remembered the words of Mrs. Peterson, her neighbor, a few weeks ago. "Eleanor, you have to be careful. Today's children aren't like those from before. They only see parents as a bank account." At that moment, Eleanor had defended her children. "No, Margaret. My children aren't like that. They love me." But now, sitting in her rocking chair, with the bitter taste of betrayal in her mouth, she realized her neighbor had been right. That night, she couldn't sleep. She tossed and turned in bed, thinking about the documents she had signed, her children's faces, the words she had managed to read before Catherine took the papers away. At 4 a.m, she got up and went to Frank's desk. She turned on the lamp and opened the drawer where she kept her important documents. There were the original property deeds, those that credited her as the sole owner, receipts for all the payments she had made for 40 years, proof of all the improvements she had made to the property. But there was also the other thing, the one her children didn't know existed. The copy of the will she had secretly commissioned 2 years ago, when she began to suspect that her children's visits only increased when they needed money. That will had been her insurance policy, her plan B, in case her suspicions were ever confirmed. And now, after what had happened that afternoon, she realized it had been a very intelligent decision. She picked up the phone and dialed Harold Peterson's number, the lawyer who had drafted the secret will. "Hello?" answered a sleepy voice. "Mr. Peterson, this is Eleanor Hartwell. I'm sorry to wake you, but I need to speak with you urgently." "Mrs. Hartwell, what happened? Are you all right?" "Yes, I'm fine. But I think it's time to activate the plan we made 2 years ago." There was silence on the other end of the line. Then Mr. Peterson spoke seriously. "Are you sure? Did what we suspected happen?" "Yes, exactly what you told me could happen occurred. My children made me sign some papers today. I think they're trying to take my properties." "Do you have the documents?" "No, they took them. But I managed to read some words before they took them from me. Transfer, assignment of rights, new owners." Mr. Peterson sighed deeply. "Mrs. Hartwell, come see me early tomorrow morning. We'll review all the documentation and see what we can do." "Mr. Peterson, do you think they really wanted to steal from me?" "Mrs. Hartwell, after 40 years practicing law, I've seen many cases like this. Unfortunately, It's more common than one would like. But don't worry, there's a reason we prepared that plan 2 years ago. When she hung up the phone, Eleanor felt strangely calm. There was no turning back now. She could no longer pretend she didn't know what was happening. Her children had shown their true face, and now she would have to show hers. She returned to her bed, but still couldn't sleep. Her mind worked at full speed, remembering details from the afternoon that she hadn't noticed at the time. The way Robert had quickly put away the documents after she signed, Catherine's smile of relief when she finished signing. Everyone's hurry to leave after getting what they wanted. She got up again and went to her bedroom window. From there she could see her entire property, the fruit trees she had planted with her own hands, the garden she had tended for decades, the pens where she had raised chickens and pigs to sell for extra money, the house she had built and improved brick by brick. All of that was hers. Hers by right. Hers through a lifetime of work. Hers through the sweat of her brow and the tears she had shed. And now her own children wanted to take it from her. But Eleanor Hartwell hadn't survived poverty, early widowhood, decades of hard work, to be defeated by her own children's greed. There was something they didn't know. The woman who had raised 5 children alone, who had turned 5 acres of barren land into a thriving property, who had built a patrimony with her own hands, wasn't the naive old woman they thought she was. Tomorrow would begin a battle she hadn't sought, but was willing to fight. A battle for her dignity, for her patrimony, to prove that a mother's love can become the most terrible fury when that mother is betrayed. While waiting for dawn, Eleanor smiled for the first time in days. Her children had made a fatal mistake. They had underestimated the woman who had raised them. Soon they would discover that the experience and cunning of 82 years weighed more than their greed and ingratitude. The sun began to rise, illuminating the land she loved so much. Eleanor dressed carefully, ate breakfast calmly, and prepared to go see Mr. Peterson. She had a war to win, a lesson to teach, and dignity to defend. Her children thought they had won the game, but in reality, the game was just beginning. Eleanor bathed with cold water, as she had done for decades to wake up completely. She dressed in her best clothes, the black suit she had bought for her friend's funeral, the leather shoes she kept for important occasions, and the pearl necklace Frank had given her on their 20th wedding anniversary. She wanted to look respectable, dignified, like the owner she was. Before leaving, she prepared coffee in the tin coffee pot she had used for 30 years, and sat at the kitchen table to have breakfast. But every bite of sweet bread tasted like cardboard. Her children's betrayal had poisoned even the simplest flavors. She looked at the clock. 7 in the morning. Mr. Peterson expected her at 8 at his office. She had plenty of time, but didn't want to stay home reliving the scene from yesterday over and over. She decided to walk to town, as she had done for years when she didn't have money for the bus. The fresh morning air did her good. While walking along the dirt path that connected her property to the main road, she greeted neighbors who were beginning their daily tasks. Mr. Thompson, milking his cows. Mrs. Rodriguez, sweeping her yard. Mr. Stevens's children, running towards school. "Good morning, Mrs. Hartwell," Mrs. Rodriguez shouted from her yard. "How are you?" "Fine, thank you, Rosa. And your family?" "We're getting by, struggling, but moving forward." Eleanor continued walking, but Mrs. Rodriguez's words echoed in her head. Struggling but moving forward. That had been her entire life. Struggling but moving forward. And she wasn't going to stop doing it now. She arrived in town when businesses were just beginning to open. The smell of fresh bread came from Mr. Jimmy's bakery. The church bells rang 8 in the morning, and the first buses began circulating, taking people to the bigger cities. Mr. Peterson's office was in a colonial house in the center of town, 2 blocks from the main square. It was an old construction, with thick walls and high ceilings, that the lawyer had inherited from his father and had converted into his practice. Eleanor knocked on the carved wooden door exactly at 8. Mr. Peterson opened it immediately, as if he had been waiting for her on the other side. "Mrs. Hartwell, please come in. How are you? Did you sleep at all?" "Little, Mr. Peterson, but I'm determined to do whatever we need to do." Harold Peterson was 65 years old and had been a lawyer in town for 4 decades. He knew all the families, had seen several generations born and grow up, and had handled cases of inheritances, divorces, and family disputes that had taught him the worst and best of human nature. His office was austere but welcoming. Bookshelves full of civil and criminal codes, a mahogany desk, leather chairs worn by years, and on the walls, his professional titles alongside photographs of his family. "Please sit down, Mrs. Hartwell. Tell me exactly what happened yesterday." Eleanor recounted everything in detail. Robert's strange call, the meeting of all the siblings, the nervous attitude, the documents they had presented, the words she had managed to read before Catherine took them away, the rush to leave after getting the signatures. Mr. Peterson listened without interrupting, taking notes in a yellow notebook. When she finished speaking, the lawyer removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes with fatigue. "Mrs. Hartwell, I'm afraid your suspicions are correct. From what you describe, it seems your children tried to get you to sign property transfer documents. But is that legal? Can they do that?" "Technically, yes, they can if you sign voluntarily. The problem is, they didn't tell you the truth about what you were signing. That's called fraud, and it's a crime." Eleanor felt her stomach clench. "So I lost my land?" Mr. Peterson smiled, for the first time since the conversation had begun. "No, Mrs. Hartwell, you didn't lose it. Remember the plan we made 2 years ago?" Eleanor nodded. 2 years ago, when she began to suspect her children's true intentions, she had gone to Mr. Peterson to protect her patrimony. The lawyer had suggested creating a trust and establishing limited powers of attorney that would protect her from situations exactly like the one she had experienced yesterday. "The power of attorney you signed with me 2 years ago specifies that any document related to property transfer must be ratified before a notary public and with express authorization from the trust we established. Without that authorization, any signature of yours on transfer documents has no legal validity." "That means that?" "That means, even though you signed those documents yesterday, the transfer isn't valid. Your children can't do anything with those signatures." Eleanor felt an enormous weight lift from her shoulders. "But they don't know?" "No, because you never told them about the trust or the limited powers. It was part of the plan. Keep it secret until it was necessary to use it." Mr. Peterson got up and went to his file cabinet, from which he took out a thick folder with Eleanor Hartwell's name written on the label. "Here's all the documentation, Mrs. Hartwell. The trust, the powers of attorney, the will we drafted, and all the documents that prove you took legal precautions 2 years ago." Eleanor reviewed the documents. Everything was there: her signature, the date from 2 years ago, the official seals. It was as if she had traveled to the past and protected herself against her own children's betrayal. "Mr. Peterson, do you think my children are going to try to sell the land?" "It's very likely, Mrs. Hartwell. If they went to the trouble of deceiving you to get those signatures, it's because they have immediate plans for the property." "And what's going to happen when they discover they can't do anything?" Mr. Peterson leaned back in his chair and looked at her seriously. "They're going to discover that their mother is much smarter than they thought, and they're going to have to accept the consequences of their actions." Eleanor was quiet for a moment, processing all the information. Then a smile began to form on her face. "Mr. Peterson, I want my children to learn their lesson. I want them to know they can't take advantage of me." "What do you have in mind, Mrs. Hartwell?" "I want to wait for them to discover on their own that their plans aren't going to work. I want to see their faces when they realize their mother outsmarted them. Mr. Peterson smiled. After 40 years of practicing law, he had developed great respect for poetic justice. That sounds perfect, Mrs. Hartwell. But meanwhile, we have to be prepared for anything. It's likely that when your children discover they can't sell the property, they'll come to pressure you again. What do you advise? First, don't tell them anything about the trust yet. Let them dig themselves deeper into their own deception. Second, document everything. If they visit you again, if they say anything suspicious, if they try to pressure you. And third, be patient. Justice sometimes takes time, but it always comes. Eleanor got up from the chair, feeling completely different from how she had arrived. An hour ago, she felt like a helpless victim. Now, she felt like a strategist prepared for battle. Mr. Peterson, how much do I owe you for this consultation? Nothing, Mrs. Hartwell. This is part of the services you already paid me for 2 years ago. Besides, I have to confess I'm curious to see how this story ends. When she left the lawyer's office, Eleanor decided not to return home immediately. Instead, she headed to the town's main square. She wanted to walk, think, process everything she had discovered. She sat on one of the wrought iron benches surrounding the central gazebo. It was Thursday morning, and the square was relatively quiet. Some elderly people read the newspaper under the shade of trees. Some young mothers watch their children playing on the swings, and flower and fruit vendors arrange their merchandise. Eleanor observed the families passing in front of her. A father carrying his young son on his shoulders. A grandmother buying ice cream for her granddaughter. A mother lovingly scolding her son for getting his clothes dirty. Normal scenes of family life that reminded her of happier times with her own children. When had everything started to change? When had greed begun to weigh more than love? She remembered when Robert was 10 years old and had fallen from a tree. She had run 3 miles carrying him to the health center because they didn't have money for a taxi. The doctor had told her that if she had been half an hour later, the boy would have lost his arm due to infection. She remembered when Catherine was 15 and had gotten pregnant. Instead of throwing her out of the house like many parents would have done, Eleanor had supported her, had taken care of the baby while Catherine finished high school, had worked double shifts to support her daughter and grandson. She remembered when Michael had lost his first job and had come home crying like a 5-year-old. She had comforted him, prepared his favorite food, and the next day had gone out looking for work for him, using her contacts in town. She remembered when Louis had started drinking too much and had come home drunk and aggressive. Instead of calling the police, Eleanor had sat with him all night, listened to his problems, and gotten him into a rehabilitation program. She remembered when David had disappeared for 6 months, evading his responsibilities as a father. She had taken care of his child, had paid child support so the boy wouldn't suffer, and when David returned, she had received him with open arms. A lifetime of sacrifices, unconditional love, limitless forgiveness. And this is how they repaid her. Mrs. Hartwell? The voice pulled her from her memories. It was Mrs. Peterson, her neighbor, who was carrying 2 bags from the market. Margaret, how are you? Fine, thank you. And what are you doing here so early? Eleanor hesitated for a moment. She felt like telling someone everything, unburdening herself, sharing her pain. But she also remembered Mr. Peterson's words. Document everything. Don't reveal the plan yet. Be patient. I came to do some paperwork with Mr. Peterson. Ah, any problems? No, nothing important. Just updating some papers. Mrs. Peterson sat beside her on the bench. Eleanor, can I ask you something? Of course. Yesterday, I saw all your children arrive at your house at the same time. Any special occasion? Eleanor felt her stomach clench. If Mrs. Peterson had noticed the meeting, Probably other neighbors had too. In a small town, everything was known. No, nothing special. They just wanted to visit me. How nice, Eleanor. I wish my children visited me more often. After a few minutes of conversation about trivial town topics, Mrs. Peterson said goodbye and continued on her way. Eleanor stayed a while longer in the square, enjoying the tranquility, before deciding to return home. The return trip seemed shorter. She was thinking about everything she had discovered in Mr. Peterson's office, mentally planning the next steps, feeling a strange mixture of pain and satisfaction. When she arrived home, she immediately noticed something was different. The front door was ajar. When she was sure she had locked it before leaving, she approached carefully and pushed the door. "Is anyone there?" "Mom? Where were you?" It was Robert, coming out of the kitchen with a cup of coffee in his hand, as if he were in his own house. "Robert, what are you doing here? How did you get in?" "I have a copy of the key, remember? You gave it to me years ago for emergencies." Eleanor had completely forgotten that Robert had a copy of the key. She had given it to him when he lived closer and helped her with bank errands. "But what emergency is there?" Robert looked nervous, just like yesterday. "Mom, we need to talk. I have news about the papers you signed yesterday." Eleanor's heart began to beat faster. Had they tried to use the documents so soon? What kind of news? "Sit down, Mom. I'm going to explain everything." Eleanor sat in her rocking chair, but kept her back straight and eyes fixed on Robert. She wanted to hear exactly what he was going to tell her. Robert walked nervously around the living room before speaking. "Mom, yesterday when we told you the papers were to protect your properties, well, we didn't tell you the whole truth." "Oh no?" "The truth is that we need to sell the land." There it was. The confession Eleanor had been waiting for. Her heart broke a little more, but she kept her face neutral. "Sell the land? What for?" Robert sat in the armchair across from her, avoiding her gaze. "Mom, we're all in serious financial trouble. Catherine is going to lose her house if she doesn't pay the 6 months she owes in rent. Michael owes so much money they're going to repossess his truck. Louis lost his job and has no way to pay for his son's college expenses. David owes a fortune in child support and could go to jail. And I lost all my money in bad investments." Eleanor listened without interrupting. It was exactly what she already knew, but it hurt more to hear it directly from her son's mouth. "And the solution is to sell my land?" "Mom, it's 5 acres in an excellent location. We can get a lot of money for them, enough to solve all our problems." "And what about me? Where am I going to live?" Robert finally looked at her directly. "Mom, you can come live with one of us. Catherine has an extra room, or you can live with me. You won't be helpless." Eleanor felt a cold fury rising from her stomach to her throat. Did these children think they could kick her out of the house she had built with her own hands so she could go live as a burden in other people's houses? "Robert," she said in a very calm voice, "have you already put the land up for sale?" Robert turned red as a tomato. "Well, yes, Mom. We went this morning to a real estate agent. The listing is already published." Eleanor nodded slowly. Her children hadn't wasted time. In less than 24 hours, they had gotten the signatures and put the property up for sale. "And how much are you asking for the land?" $500,000, Mom. It's a lot of money." "And how are you going to divide it?" "We're going to split it into 5 equal parts. Each one will receive $100,000. Eleanor did the math mentally. $100,000 for each child added up to $500,000. They hadn't left a single dollar for her. "And how much am I going to receive?" Robert became nervous again. "Mom, you don't need money anymore. We're going to take care of all your expenses. So I'm not going to receive anything from the sale of my own land." "Mom, don't see it that way. Think of it as an investment in your children's future. Eleanor had to clench her fists to keep from getting up and slapping him right there. Her blood was boiling with indignation, but she knew she had to stay calm. She had to follow the plan. Robert, have you already signed any contract with the real estate agent? Not yet, Mom, but tomorrow we're going to sign. The agent says he already has several interested buyers. Eleanor smiled internally. Her children were going to get a very unpleasant surprise when they tried to sign that contract. All right, son, if that's what you all decided. Robert looked surprised by his mother's calm reaction. He had probably expected screaming, tears, pleas. Really, Mom? Aren't you angry? Robert, you're adults. If you think that's the best decision, I respect your decision. Robert visibly relaxed. Mom, I knew you'd understand. You've always been very understanding with us. Yes, son. I've always been very understanding. Robert got up from the armchair. Well, Mom, I have to go. Tomorrow I'll tell you how it went with the agent. All right, son. Take care. When Robert left, Eleanor stayed seated in her rocking chair, processing the entire conversation. Her children really believed they could sell her land, keep all the money, and leave her living on charity in other people's houses. The audacity was impressive. But the fall was going to be even more impressive. She got up and went to the phone. She dialed Mr. Peterson's number. Hello? Mr. Peterson, this is Eleanor. Robert just confirmed everything. They've already put the land up for sale and tomorrow they're going to sign with the real estate agent. Really? They worked fast. Mr. Peterson, are you ready for the next phase of the plan? Absolutely, Mrs. Hartwell. Tomorrow afternoon, when they try to sign the contract and discover they can't, they're going to receive a call from my office explaining the real legal situation. Perfect. I want to be present when that happens. Don't worry, Mrs. Hartwell. You're going to have your moment of justice. That night, Eleanor had dinner calmly, watched her favorite shows, and went to bed early. For the first time in days, she slept deeply. She knew tomorrow was going to be a very interesting day. Her children thought they had won the game, but in reality, they were just beginning to discover what kind of woman had raised that family. The next day, Eleanor woke up with a feeling of expectation she hadn't felt in years. She bathed, dressed in her best clothes, and prepared a hearty breakfast. She knew she would need all her strength for what was coming. At 10 in the morning, the phone rang. It was Catherine. Mom, how are you? Fine, honey. And you? Very well, Mom. Hey, did Robert tell you about selling the land? Yes, he told me. And what do you think? Eleanor smiled to herself. That you all know what you're doing, honey. Oh, Mom, I knew you'd understand. You're the best mother in the world. After hanging up, Eleanor went to her living room window. From there, she could see the entrance road to her property. She knew that at some point during the day, she would receive more visits. She wasn't wrong. At 2 in the afternoon, she saw Michael's pickup truck arrive, followed by Robert's car. They were all coming together again, but this time, their attitude was completely different. They no longer seemed nervous or guilty. They seemed triumphant. Eleanor received them at the door with a serene smile. Mom! Shouted Catherine, giving her an exaggerated hug. We have wonderful news! Yes? What happened? Robert looked euphoric. Mom, the agent says he already has 3 interested buyers. We might sell for even more than $500,000. That's good, son. Michael rubbed his hands with excitement. Mom, we're on our way to sign the contract with the agent. We just came to let you know. And when does the sale happen? Louis lit a cigarette, this time without nervousness. The agent says in 2 weeks we can have the money in hand. David, who had been quiet, finally spoke. Mom, we want you to know this is the best thing for everyone. You'll see that you'll be very comfortable living with one of us. Eleanor looked at them one by one. Her 5 children, radiant with happiness over the money they thought they already had in their hands. Money that came from selling their mother's property without giving her a single dollar in return. "Children," she said in a soft voice, "are you sure everything is going to work out?" "Of course, Mom," Robert responded. "We already reviewed all the documentation. Everything is in order." "And are you sure I signed everything you needed me to sign?" Catherine laughed. "Oh, Mom, of course. You have your signature on all the necessary documents." "All right then, drive carefully." They said goodbye with kisses and hugs, promising to return that evening to celebrate after signing the contract. Eleanor watched them drive away from her window, knowing that in a few hours their lives would change forever. At 4 in the afternoon, the phone rang. It was Mr. Peterson. "Mrs. Hartwell, are you ready?" "More than ready, Mr. Peterson." "Perfect. Right now they're explaining to your children that the transfer isn't valid. I estimate in an hour they'll be knocking on your door. I'll be waiting for them." Eleanor sat in her rocking chair and took out her knitting. She wanted to look completely calm when they arrived. She wanted them to find her doing what she had done her entire life, working with her hands while waiting for her children to come home. She didn't have to wait long. At 5:15, she heard the sound of several cars arriving at full speed. This time they didn't go to the main entrance. They parked disorderly in the yard, as if there was an emergency. Car doors slammed. Eleanor heard agitated voices, screams, words she couldn't make out, but that sounded desperate. Robert was the first to enter, without knocking, his face red with fury. "Mom, what did you do?" Eleanor looked up from her knitting with feigned surprise. "What happened, son? Why are you screaming?" "We can't sell the land. The agent says the transfer isn't valid." "Oh no? And why not?" Catherine entered crying, her makeup running from tears. "Mom, they told us you have a trust, that we need authorization from a bank." Michael entered after her, punching the wall with his fist. "Mom, the agent's lawyer says you tricked us, that the signatures we got are worthless." Louis and David entered last, both looking at their mother as if she were a stranger. Eleanor set her knitting on the table very calmly and looked at them one by one. There was no longer nervousness in their faces. There was fury, desperation, and something else, fear. "Sit down," she said, in a calm but firm voice. "We're not going to sit down," shouted Robert. "We want an explanation." Eleanor stood up from her rocking chair. Despite her 82 years, at that moment, she projected an authority that made her 5 children involuntarily step back. "I said sit down," she roared with a voice they hadn't heard since they were children. The silence that followed was absolute. One by one, they sat down in the living room chairs, like scolded children. Eleanor walked to the center of the room and looked at them with a coldness they had never seen in her eyes. "You want an explanation? I'm going to give you an explanation." She walked to the cabinet where she kept family photographs and took the same one she had looked at 2 days earlier, all of them together last Christmas. 2 years ago, she began in a measured voice, I started suspecting that my children only visited me when they needed money. I started noticing that every time you came, there was an emergency, a debt, a problem I had to solve with my wallet. Robert tried to interrupt. "Mom, Silence!" shouted Eleanor with a force that left them speechless. 40 years I stayed quiet when you disrespected me. Now you're going to listen to me until I finish." She continued walking around the room, like a general giving instructions to her soldiers. 2 years ago, I went to Mr. Peterson and told him, "My heart tells me my children love me, but my head tells me I have to protect myself." He helped me create a trust and powers of attorney that protected me from exactly what you tried to do to me. Catherine sobbed. Mom, we didn't know. Of course you didn't know. Because you think your mother is a stupid old woman who doesn't understand anything. Eleanor walked toward Robert, who avoided her gaze. Robert, do you remember when you were 10 and fell from the tree? I ran 3 miles carrying you so you wouldn't lose your arm. Is this what I get in return? She turned to Catherine. Catherine, do you remember when you got pregnant at 15? Instead of throwing you out of the house, I supported you, took care of your child, worked to support both of you. Is this what I get in return? She went to Michael. Michael? How many times did I mortgage this house to get your businesses out of trouble? How many times did I lend you money you never paid back? Is this what I get in return? She approached Louis. Louis, when you got into drinking, who paid for your rehabilitation? Who took care of your family while you recovered? Is this what I get in return? Finally, she stood in front of David. David, when you disappeared for 6 months evading your responsibilities, who took care of your child? Who paid child support so the boy wouldn't suffer? Is this what I get in return? The silence in the room was sepulchral. The 5 siblings had their heads down, unable to look their mother in the eyes. Eleanor returned to the center of the room. You came here 2 days ago with a lie. You told me the papers were to protect me, when they were really to steal from me. You thought you could deceive the woman who raised you, who fed you, who clothed you, who educated you, who sacrificed her entire life for you. Robert raised his head. Mom, we're desperate. We have debts, problems. And that's my problem? Shouted Eleanor. You're adults. Your problems are your responsibility, not mine. She walked to the window and pointed toward the land. I bought this land with the money from your father's life insurance. I built this house brick by brick, working as a maid in other people's houses while you slept comfortably in your beds. This property is mine, by right, by sweat, by tears, by blood. She turned to them with eyes full of tears, but with a voice firm as steel. And you wanted to take it from me, to leave me on the street in my final years of life. You wanted to sell it and divide the money without giving me a single dollar. You wanted me to live on charity in your houses like a burden, like a nuisance. Catherine got up from the chair, sobbing. Mom, forgive us. We didn't know what we were doing. You did know what you were doing, roared Eleanor. You knew perfectly well you were lying to me. You knew perfectly well you were stealing from me. And you did it with full intention. Michael also stood up. Mom, we can fix this, we can. No, shouted Eleanor. There's nothing left to fix. You already made your decision and I made mine. She walked to Frank's desk and took out some documents. Do you know what this is? It's my will. The will I made 2 years ago when I started suspecting you. The 5 siblings froze. In this will, everything I have goes to your children, my grandchildren. They will receive their inheritance when they turn 25, administered by the same trust you didn't know existed. Robert stood up, trembling. Mom, you can't do that. I already did it. You're not going to receive a single dollar of my inheritance. But that's not the worst thing that's going to happen to you. She looked at them one by one, savoring the moment. Tomorrow, I'm going to the town center. I'm going to tell Mrs. Rodriguez, Mrs. Peterson, Mr. Thompson, everyone I know, what you tried to do to me. You're going to carry that shame for the rest of your lives. Louis stood up desperately. Mom, that's going to ruin our reputation. Perfect, shouted Eleanor. Because that's exactly what you deserve. For everyone to know what kind of children raised this family. David began to cry. Mom, we're your family. We're your blood. Eleanor approached him and put her hand on his cheek, but her eyes remained cold as ice. David, you will be my blood until the day I die. I will love you forever because I'm your mother, and that can't be changed. She paused and withdrew her hand. But trusting you, that will never happen again. Robert made one last desperate attempt. Mom, if you forgive us, if you give us another chance, we— What? Asked Eleanor sarcastically. Are you going to change? Are you going to stop seeing me as a bank account? Are you going to start really loving me and not just when you need money? She walked to the front door and opened it wide. Get out of my house. And don't come back until you've learned to be decent people. The 5 siblings stood up slowly, defeated. One by one they left the house. Robert was the last. At the door, he turned to his mother. Mom, will you really never forgive us? Eleanor looked at him with a mixture of infinite love and sadness. Robert, forgiveness is earned, and you have a lot of work to do before earning it. When they left, Eleanor closed the door and leaned against it. The tears she had been holding back during the entire confrontation finally came out. She cried for the betrayal. She cried for the lost innocence. She cried for the family she thought she had, and discovered never existed. But after crying, she dried her tears and walked to her rocking chair. She took her knitting and continued where she had left off. It was a blue sweater for her youngest grandson. For the first time in weeks, she felt completely at peace. She had protected her patrimony, defended her dignity, and taught a lesson her children would never forget. Outside it began to rain, but inside her house, Eleanor Hartwell felt stronger than ever. She had won the most important battle of her life. The battle to prove that a mother can love infinitely, but can also be the fiercest warrior when that mother is betrayed. Her children had underestimated the woman who raised them. They had thought that age had made her weak and naive. But they had just discovered that the experience of 82 years, combined with the broken heart of a betrayed mother, was a more powerful force than all their greed combined. The rain continued falling, symbolically washing away the pain and betrayal. Eleanor knitted peacefully, smiling as she thought about her grandchildren's faces when, years later, they would find out that their grandmother had left them everything because she knew how to distinguish between true love and greed, disguised as filial affection. That night, for the first time in months, she slept deeply. She had proven that justice, though delayed, always comes, and that never, but never, should one underestimate the power of a mother protecting what is hers. 3 months later, Eleanor received a letter. It was from Robert. In it, he apologized for what they had done, admitted they had been blinded by desperation and greed, and asked for a chance to rebuild their relationship. He mentioned that all 5 siblings were working to pay their debts honestly, without depending on anyone else. Eleanor read the letter twice, then put it in Frank's desk drawer. It was a start, but forgiveness would take time. Real change had to be proven with actions, not just words. But for the first time since that terrible day in March, she felt a small spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, her children were finally learning what it meant to be decent human beings. The sweater she had been knitting was almost finished. Tomorrow she would start a new project, matching scarves for all her grandchildren. After all, winter was coming. And family, real family, always took care of each other. The end.